Welcome back to Trending in Education. I'm Brandon Jones. I'm joined here today by just Mike Palmer, not even a picture of Dan. Mike Palmer, you are here. You are a real live human being.
I am, and I like to go by just Mike Palmer. Hey, it's just Mike Palmer here.
It's just Mike Palmer.
But sometimes just Mike Palmer is more than enough.
To be clear, listeners, I didn't mean I'm disappointed that it's just Mike Palmer. I meant Mike Palmer and no one else.
Yeah, you have a nice opportunity for some dedicated Mike Palmer time.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, let's get it on. So today we're talking gig economy.
That's right. We're getting giggy with it.
Getting giggy with it. Yes. That is definitely a trend. I think we may talk a little later, or maybe even in a later pod, about some learning tie into that.
Mm-hmm.
But should we talk first? What's the gig economy? What's a gig? Should we define some terms?
Yeah. Let's go way back. Let's take the Wayback Machine to I believe it was 1915, where there were some early jazz hepcats who originally coined the term gig to mean a job, like a job that like a jazz musician would have.
Like a jazz gig.
A jazz gig. And I don't know if you remember when we were talking about hipsters way back when.
You were talking hepcats when we were talking hipsters.
That's what I'm saying. So hip and hep is also, jazz etymology. So a lot of these things come from those hepcats, daddy-o, from back in the day. And gig, I think, had its inception there. And interestingly, we could share out the link to like the etymology site, but it talks about I did see a graph of like the prevalence of the word over time, and it was really prevalent back in like the late 19th century into the 20th century. Then it dipped for quite some time, and then basically within the last 10, 15 years, it's really made
it's having
a comeback.
It's having a explosion.
A renaissance,
yes,
if you will.
Yeah.
And how would you characterize a gig? Like, how would you define? I went etymology. You want to go definition in the current parlance?
Yeah. So I unlike Dan, don't have something to read to you, but I would define a gig as a small, discrete job.
Yes.
And the sort of atomic unit of that size can be really small.
For sure.
We were reading in some articles here that filling out a 5-minute online survey for pay may be a gig.
For sure.
So
it's almost a micro gig.
Yeah. So that's real small.
For sure.
A gig could be an 18-month contract assignment. So it's not only can be small, it's also of indeterminate size.
Yes, but it's not full-time.
It's not full-time.
Yep. And there's some interesting trends we're seeing around whether people are 100% gig-based in their employment or whether they're supplementing their primary employment with gig work. But it's also, in many ways, tied to the sharing economy and millennials who are emerging into a very different workforce in the 21st century, and a lot to talk about. We well researched this one, I will say. We have McKinsey articles.
We do. I think we should go there early.
We have HBR.
We've got that.
We have LinkedIn.
We've got it all.
And we have the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
BLS.
I mean, when I heard BLS, I thought WBLS, which is like a radio station in New York. So they're kind of like a hip hop station from back in the day.
A hip hop station.
A hepcat hip hop station. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So like I almost feel like kind of classed up by these sources.
We're ready to go.
I mean? Yeah.
We're ready to go.
So what strikes your fancy? Which one do you want?
Well, I think in the McKinsey article, let's start there. So.
Sure.
We talked about what a gig is and the gig economy, and you talked about more, with the millennial workforce being in a workforce that looks different today than it did 20 years ago. The independent workforce, as reported by this article, is that up to 162 million people in Europe and the United States, this is 20 to 30% of the working age population, engage in some form of independent work. So, and then there's a matrix. There's a 2x2
Yes.
in here.
Oh my God.
That's
I know.
that's a good.
We got very excited. We were
did.
going back and forth coming in, and I was like, "You had me at a 2x2."
I know. Thank you.
Yeah.
The thing about that is it's framework, and I think frameworks are good for discussion. Let's hope you think so too, listeners. But it's good for it's like mental modeling.
Yes.
Provides some structure.
Correct.
So we like it. So the axes of this 2x2 is choice and form of income. So on one axis is preferred choice versus not preferred. It's out of necessity. So are you working because that is your preferred choice, or are you working independently out of necessity? And then the other, and then maybe Mike, you can walk us through what the four boxes are. But the other axis is whether this is your primary form of income or this is supplemental income.
Right. Yes. And so that's the 2x2. Again, picture superiority effect is once again in place on this podcast. There's a picture. It's superior. We'll try to get it to you, but we'll walk you through it at the same time. So just going back through what you were just talking about, Brandon, the preferred choice and the primary income cell is what they're calling free agents. So the free agents, they don't want to be tied down by the man to a corporate gig. They want to have freedom.
Right.
And this is like your freelance writers and your creatives, people working on screenplays, a lot of folks in the tech industry. If you have relevant skills there, you have the ability to both earn enough through your primary income, and also it's a preference.
Right.
That's your free agents.
Yeah, that's the best box. I'm gonna hot take.
Right.
Hot take. It's got a good name.
Yes.
It's also of the 162 million that I quoted earlier, and this was based on a survey of 8,000 U.S. and European respondents by McKinsey. So this is obviously a lot of extrapolation here, but if those same numbers are about 30% of the independent workers fall in that box, and that'd be about 49 million people. So there's a lot of free agents out there.
There's a lot of free agents, and it's also we know that healthcare in the U.S. is a bit upended right now, or a little bit of an open question exactly how that will be provided, and then particularly if you don't have a steady full-time job. That's the one challenge, I think, that's true for folks whose primary income is through the gig economy. They have to figure out how to get their health care. They have many different challenges than traditional full-time employment at a large organization. Right. While I think it is I always look for the 2x2 for the winner. This is the winning cell.
It's the winning cell.
But there are new problems that need to be solved.
The ACA makes it, at least for now. And we're dropping this pod.
Yes.
Who knows what will happen between recording time and pod dropping time.
Yes.
But although last night, as of real time, there was a pretty decisive vote.
Some drama in the Senate.
ACA still afloat. So. I think that is an interesting development, is that through ACA, like that now affords the opportunity for a lot of these free agents to make that choice.
Exactly.
Now you're trading against other employer benefits, in many cases 401ks, and subsidized in an employer way, healthcare.
And you've talked about how like learning and upskilling and continuing
you're on your own.
Development.
You're on your own in this box. Because you're conceding some of that, and that I think is the trend. And talking about trends here, more people are choosing quality of life, and as I think you would argue, if it's a preferred choice and your primary income, if this is potentially a quality of life choice over some of the more standard employer granted benefits.
That's right. And then the other preferred choice, folks who like the gig lifestyle, but it's not their primary income, is what this article referred to as the casual earners.
Yes.
Which is folks who enjoy the gig economy. We at Kaplan, we have a lot of part-time teachers.
Yep.
Who would, I think, fall predominantly into this cell.
Correct.
Where it's a supplemental income, but they do it because they love it.
Yes.
And it's nice to also get supplemental income doing something you love. So that's the casual earner. And I think more and more, and a lot of the articles that we read sort of talk to this trend, is that more folks who maybe historically would only have had a full-time job and that was the entirety of their income are starting to move into this cell. It's the biggest percentage, 40% of
plurality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Are 64 million folks. 40% of those in the gig workforce are what are called casual earners, and I actually think it's interesting as well when you start thinking about the aging workforce, where as you get older, you're sort of preparing for retirement. Maybe you're even retired. So like, part of your income is your pension or Social Security, even as you get up there. I think more and more there will be folks who still want to have some earning power that's their own. And also be able to do things that they really love.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So like, also I think about all the show folk I know, like the aspiring actors and actresses. That's the group that I would sort of characterize here. The folks who haven't quit their day job, particularly those in the corporate setting.
Mike, are you gonna? Is this like the first of several conversations in which you tell us you're really a showman?
Well, you see, like my only challenge, I would say like my gig right now is podcasting, and my income with podcasting is not there.
Yeah,
but yeah.
You don't get paid for this?
Well, I haven't been told to stop.
Right.
So in essence, that is being paid.
I think from a certain point of view.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the folks. So that was in the row in this 2x2 that was preferred choice, and out of necessity.
Yeah.
People for whom out of necessity gig work is their primary income is called the reluctance.
Yeah.
This is worse because it seems like this is not their preferred choice.
Correct.
Since they are in the not preferred choice row.
Yes.
It's 14% of the population, 23 million folks there. And I wonder how many of those turn gigs into more full-time work.
Yeah.
That happens here. You
Sure.
mentioned our teachers who I think are in the casual earners bucket box, but hopefully not too many reluctants out there.
Right.
But some those folks, and whether you are a contract copywriter or editor or designer, like a lot of folks trade those jobs and with them, those gig jobs, and
Sure.
with them the freedoms that come with that for the stability of a full-time role with a traditional employer.
Exactly. And I think the bottom row here gets a little sadder too, because sometimes the reluctants are reluctant because they can't get the full-time job.
That's right. I was wondering how many of those there's some fluidity across the matrix here. Mm-hmm. Any given person who's in the gig economy at any given time may be in one, but she may be moving to another.
Yep.
I think that the hope is to move up and to the left on this chart here.
Sure.
And then finally, so the last box is people who are working gigs but not enough to make it their primary income.
Right.
They prefer not to, and those are the financially strapped, which also sound like we talked about how language matters. Free agents.
Yeah.
Free agents sounds so good. Like we love freedom. Like we're William Wallace American or something.
Sure.
Financially strapped sounds worse.
Yeah, casual earners is like, I can earn whenever I want.
Yeah.
I just want to casually earn sometimes. It's a nice thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
financially strapped is like
not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When's my next gig, bro?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you mentioned, one of the gigs was, filling out a survey. Not a way to make a lot of money. You know what I mean? So like you're kind of some of the interesting thing is the nature of gigs are such that, Ryan Gosling and Scarlett Johansson are also technically in the gig economy.
They are.
Unless they're under a major contract.
Yeah.
But like they're doing okay.
They're doing fine.
They got plenty of gigs. They're going to be fine.
What's good for the goose is good for the Gosling.
they're nice. Take a gander at that.
Yeah.
But they're free. Those guys, they'd be free agents, but they're doing fine.
They're doing fine.
As opposed to people whose sole means of income is TaskRabbit or, Uber driving.
Mechanical
Turking. Not necessarily a way to make a lot of money. The only way you could do that, you almost by virtue of doing it are going to be financially strapped. If it's your primary means, that's why you're reluctant because you're probably not going to earn enough. And then if it's a supplemental income, it's probably a lot of hours. These
Correct.
folks are they're probably working 2-3 jobs, 2-3 income sources. Also, another real life problem for this group is their taxes, where healthcare taxes more complicated than it is for folks who have a steady full-time job.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, new set of problems emerging with these sort of fundamental changes in the workforce. And I don't know whether it was these articles are all the sources are blurring together, but I think one of them was talking about how it's been like 100% increase in the gig workforce in the last 10 years.
It's explosion.
Explosion. It's exploding.
It is.
So yeah, and then the implications there for learning, I think, and the problems to be solved is an interesting frame, I think, for thinking about learning, where this group both needs to learn the skills that they could earn gig income from, but they also need to learn how to live as someone who's engaging in the gig economy, which there's really no playbook for. It's new.
Yeah, and I also think that to go back to the first part of what they need to learn, the learning needs to be, you used the word snackable before on a previous pod, it needs to be snackable, because if you're going to have a gig for 3 months or 3 weeks and you need some sort of skill acquisition to be able to do that gig well, you can't be in a 3-month training program, even one that you're self-starting.
Right.
The return on that training investment, that return on that education is going to be pretty low for a very small gig, right? So I think that's there's already that trend we've talked about is making things smaller and more snackable. But I think that for this population, this booming population, that's going to be even more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of build on that point, it's such a changing landscape depending on the field that skills you have today that you can earn some supplemental income from may change. Like Uber gets disrupted, suddenly Lyft is the thing, or the skills generally are similar, but, understanding sort of the ins and outs, kind of like the life hacks for the gig economy, they're entirely new. The good news is for folks in this space, much of this is tied to the social media generation too. So you can get a lot of information about the gig economy through Reddit and through your network of other people who are emerging as gigsters. Is that a word? It is.
I think it is now.
It is now. Yeah.
Hep cats and gigsters.
Yeah, getting giggy with it.
Yeah.
But
I thought if I can just
please.
jump in. I thought one thing that was interesting in jump off maybe from the McKinsey article to the HBR article is that entrepreneurial workers win in this, right? So the quote is the gig economy rewards hustle, and I think that's sort of a pretty American dreamy sort of bootstrapping, pull yourself up, and if you are someone who can take on 4 equally sized gigs instead of 3 equally sized gigs, you're probably going to do 33% better, than that other person, and that gets added. There's a diminishing marginal return on that probably, and starts to impede on some of those lifestyle choices. But I think that's good. I also thought that was interesting that, and this is where in the matrix that we described, the financially strapped, that is the worst of those 4 boxes, but it can be better actually than the alternative. So this talks about what's referred to in quotes even in this article as bad jobs, which is a quote from, an associate professor at Sloan, MIT B School, which are poorly paid, not secure, part-time roles with limited or no benefits and no control over schedules. So it's like the taxi driver versus Uber driver comparison. They're earning about the same amount of money, but you have a lot more autonomy in the latter, and autonomy over when you work, but also how sort of you can craft your work life to go pursue other work. And so I think it's what are we comparing it to? There is it may be. I think there are absolutely new jobs to be done, and I think learning. Want to go back there at some point. a different need for this type of worker, but it's not just comparing those workers to people who have better alternatives in the gig economy. It's also comparing against those alternatives in the traditional economy.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. To me, it ties to the concept of digital readiness, too, where Barbara Ehrenreich wrote a book called Nickel and Dime, which was really good. It was about the gig economy maybe like 15 years ago, and it was really a bit of a sad story, where, she basically put herself in the shoes of a minimum wage employee who was just trying to string together whatever kinds of gigs she could. And interestingly, at that time, that meant, cleaning homes and waitressing. And one of the things she talked about was the difficulty just getting from gig to gig.
Right.
Whereas if you think more about the gig economy and someone who's digitally ready, and they have the technology, assuming they actually have the infrastructure in their home, they're
online surveys all day long, baby.
Exactly. But also like the ability to, I think about this at work too. Like if you're working from home, you can be productive all day. And
right.
The time, we joke about it, but the time it takes me to walk from my office to a conference room, if you're working from home, you just hop from meeting to meeting.
Yeah.
You don't lose the travel time.
Right.
And what's interesting, and it does tie back to that digital readiness for online, the Pew Research that we talked about a while back, is that the folks who would benefit most from the work from home digital gig economy frequently are not thinking about work that way. So like the folks who really are financially strapped may not be educated enough about the ability to supplement their income through Mechanical Turk or TaskRabbit, and then even if there were a way to take a simple survey to understand what options are best for you within the gig economy, particularly for the second job. And this is also the other language that I like is the side hustle.
Yeah, oh sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, everybody likes the side hustle.
There's even a nice Panoply podcast called the Side Hustle School. So shout out to Side Hustle School. I forget the guy who hosts it, but Elon Musk's the Elon Musk's honorary
memorial seat
is also available for you. But I think it is interesting. Like, how do we give folks the information they need to succeed here? Again, like I mentioned before, I think a lot of it is probably crowdsourced for those who understand the best way to crowdsource today. But like we said before, like those 4 cells and the folks within the gig economy it's a really broad cross section of America, many of whom may not be going to Reddit on a daily basis.
Yeah,
but they probably could.
And I think that's interesting when you think about some of those bad jobs, and it's described in Nickel and Dimed or in the HBR article I was just mentioning. Providing for someone who is a gig worker, providing that sort of snackable learning that can be stitched into her set of gigs so that she can trade more of those jobs that require a commute or require buying a uniform or require like all the things that end up nickel and diming someone. Mm-hmm. Whether it's just training on exposure to where you get more information, whether it's providing a service that offers that crowdsourcing and gives people who are sort of less engaged, less part of that crowd, welcomes that into that crowd. I think that can be a way to expose more people to more better gigs. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's also a sense that there are gigs to be done that are not getting done right now.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but I kind of like the idea of a working and learning sort of stitch that is, you're purposefully preparing yourself with these small bite-sized learning pieces and engagement and community pieces. Because it also talks about like marketing yourself.
Sure.
As a gigster.
Yeah.
Is like the people who are better at that do better with gigs, and I think that's a skill also.
Sure.
That one needs to be trained.
Yeah, it's the whole hustle is talent. That's Pete Rose, right?
Yeah, I think that's Charlie Hustle.
Charlie Hustle. Also, apparently he thought sportsbook was talent too, but that's a separate topic.
That's right.
So a lot going on in the gig economy. And I think we wanted to raise awareness of it just because I think it's a place that the world is starting to head towards. We try to spot the trend, see where the puck is going, if you will. And I think the other angle that we wanted to get into was more what are the implications for learning, which I think we've touched on a little.
Yeah.
Maybe pick up on that next show.
Yeah, I think let's pick up on that next show. So. I imagine that many of our listeners are listening to this pod right now between gigs.
Or maybe they're even like mechanical turking right now. They might be, when I say mechanical turking, I always think I'm saying twerking too, because twerk.
I think mechanical twerking.
That's a thing.
Pays less well.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story.
Yeah, that's
for TI, Trending in Education After Dark.
Yeah, that's a different show. With that, I think we'll head on out of here. We will see you all next week on Trending in Education with just Mike Palmer and just Brandon Jones. See, I'm trying to make it democratic here.
It's good.
Until then, follow us on the Twitter at Trending in Ed. That's at Trending in Ed. Check us out on Facebook, and always reach out if there are things that you want us to talk about. If you've got a great gig that you'd like the listeners to hear more about, reach out to us. Until next time.